Welcome back, Pilgrims, to another edition of the Gridiron Review. This week, we've got high school sports scores information. We're also going to talk about college football as well. The locals had a bad week. In fact, unbeaten Navy lost, Maryland lost, unbeaten Bowie State, led by Old Mill star Rob Chesson, all lost this week. So nothing good going there. But hey, guess what, Bill?
The Redskins won, baby.
How about
over a hapless San Francisco 49ers?
Dude, how about our boy Joe Taco? What's up with Joe Taco, man? Come on, Flacco. You got to be better than that. Michael Campanaro saved their bacon, a young man from River Hill, with a big punt return, got them into overtime. And of course, the Bears took over and went at 27-24. We'll talk about that coming up as well. But, Bill, let's go backwards here. Normally, we start with the public schools. Let's start with the private schools this week. We've got a couple of good stories going here. You know, Henry Rentz has to take over for Severn, and they just keep right on trucking. Great lacrosse player for the Admirals this week. He was a great football player, and this is one of the best stories of the high school season right now with what Severn is doing.
It sure is, and it's capturing the hearts and minds of all the Severn School alums that I know. I mean, they've had some tough times at Severn. It's a small school. There's not that much of a male population to draw from, so they've been some lean years. And
it costs a lot of money to go there. I mean, let's be honest. When you're in the neighborhood of $30,000 a year, that's more than some colleges.
And you're just at the whim of, sometimes you get a good group of athletes and sometimes you don't. In years past, we remember that Denard Melton went to Severn, John Vereen, who played at Navy. So they've had some great players in the past, and usually when you get two or three, but clearly this group has the chemistry. And they have a group of athletes, and as you mentioned, Henry Rentz is committed to Navy for lacrosse. Several of the other players that we've been mentioning on the show for the Admirals are lacrosse guys.
And that's usually one of the keys for them. When the lacrosse players come out for football, that usually gives them the added depth that they really need to compete with a lot of these teams.
Right. And, you know, they got the transfer, Craig Stevens from Glen Burnie. That obviously was a really bolstered things, and he's been an outstanding quarterback all season. I have confirmed that the last Severn School undefeated team was 1980, and the names we mentioned, Howard, Beaver, Petty, Scott Chavin, they were there, but it was not their senior year, actually, 80. I think their senior year may have been 81 or 82, but 1980 was the last Severn School undefeated team. So you're talking about a lot of years in between. If they can pull this off, they're narrowing in on that, and so much congratulations to Dwayne Tyler, first-year head coach. I mean, if he can lead Severn to an undefeated season in his first year as head coach, I don't see how he can't be the coach of the year for the Capital newspaper.
Well, you and Bob Hoke will have to have one of those knockdown dragouts in the newsroom.
Bob Hoke always gets mad when I start proclaiming who's going to get awards on this show, because I really have nothing to do with it, to be honest. I was a high school sports editor many moons ago, but that's in the hands of Bob Hoke and his staff. But I would say, just looking at it pragmatically, if a guy goes undefeated in his first year as head coach, he might be in line for that award.
Does the Brooklyn News even still exist?
No, it does not.
See,
that folded under my watch.
Bill used to make the decisions for the Brooklyn News. So
I was the high school sports editor of Capital Gazette newspapers as well.
Yes, you were. Henry Rentz, by the way, 2 touchdowns plus a key interception in playing in place of Stevens, who's out with an injury this week in a 27-21 victory over Boys Latin. They are now 7-0 on the campaign. Spalding gets the job done against Calvert Hall.
It's a big win.
Yeah, they've been playing. Calvert Hall been playing well lately. The Cardinals had really been starting to make some progress and starting to bang into the state poll as well and make some hay in the A conference. But this is a good win for Spalding as they win it by a score of 34-17. And our boy, say it with us now, Sam Ikimukami. With runs of 67, 23, and 13. He had 218 yards in the contest as AACS beat Friends 38-0. Meanwhile, on Friday night, Bill, your alma mater with a big win over Curley by a score of 49-0 as their defense was absolutely dynamite. And Donald Day, who's been great for them all year, 24 carries, 100 and 56 yards.
And Marcus Marshall, the quarterback's been pretty solid all season. I took some flack from my St. Mary's peeps that I had been picking against the Saints last week when they had a big win. I picked against them. That's because they'd lost 3 in a row. But looks like Saints may be getting it together and just in time, because this is now MIAA-B conference portion of the schedule, and St. Mary's wants to be in the mix for the playoffs, so that's a big win. Curly, as we mentioned before, they're down a little bit because they lost their coach, outstanding coach, Sean. I've gone brain dead because he played football at Towson. He was a great wide receiver at Towson, Sean Murphy.
Right.
Sean Murphy left, and Curly is kind of rebuilding under a new coaching staff. But great win for the Saints, and I'm told that they're going to win again this week by the people in the know at St. Mary's.
But maybe you need to keep that reverse kind of karma going by picking against them. That motivates them, and then they win again.
Well, I did pick.
Are you willing to sacrifice your overall percentage?
I did pick them to beat Curly because I knew Curly was winless, and I was assured that they were going to win big. But we're looking at
back on the good foot.
Just speaking of which, St. Mary's Severn, end of the year. Severn River Classic.
Well, you got a 4-3 St. Mary's team right now. You got a 7-0. So a lot of positive vibes from both programs.
Well, and how it would be if Severn is going for an undefeated season, that would be the last game to try to close out an undefeated season, and St. Mary's have an opportunity to ruin it.
We'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, in the public ranks, how about David Cates and Glen Burnie? And this is a really good job out of Glen Burnie High School. We had talked about it last week, Bill. They honored their 1967 team. Great group of guys for the Gophers there. And David Cates this week follows up with 172 yards, 26 carries, 3 touchdowns as Glen Burnie beats North County by a score of 34-12. There have been some lean years at Glen Burnie off and on, and we've talked about it. There's just too many decent athletes in the area. And I know they get plucked by the private schools a lot. They're one of the schools that gets hurt by that. But also, the ones that stay eligible and do the work in the building, we've seen Glen Burnie now start to find a little bit more traction here year by year, starting to play closer to consistent 500 football here, and this is another big win for them and David Cates with a big night.
Yeah, 2 in a row for the Gophers, and as you mentioned, Eric Woodson, their current coach, he's got them on sound footing. Glen Burnie used to be a win for anybody on the schedule for a period of time there, and that is not the case for about the last 3 seasons. Glen Burnie has been very solid and right in that mix of the mid-tier that we talk about below the Arundel, Old Mill, Broadneck, and Meade currently. That's the top 4. But, they're right there in amongst South River, Chesapeake, as we've mentioned. So, that'll be interesting to see who finishes out at the top of that. But right now, Glen Burnie winning the games you would expect them to win. That's the B&A Boulevard battle, battle of B&A, as they like to call it, Glen Burnie, North County.
Yeah, you got one at the north end of B&A and one at the south end.
That's right.
Geographically does make sense. Darius Hunter, 3 touchdowns. Ryan Sedgwick threw for 2 and ran for another as Arundel
keeps winning.
This is the team right here, Bill, that we talk about. Some teams just continue to get better week by week as the season goes along. At one point, they were at 42-8 in this game. It ends up 42-22 against Annapolis. But typical, as you would expect of a Chuck Markowitz team. He and his staff going to keep coaching, going to keep developing. They're as good as anybody at player development. And this group continues to find a stride here as the season goes on. And as we've talked about, Broadneck, North Point sitting up at the top of that points chain. Then you've got Meade and Old Mill and Arundel and South River mathematically all right in that same group where, because of North Point being where they are, it looks like you've got 4 teams for 2 spots this year in the back end of that region here. And somebody that's going to be decent is going to get left out of the playoffs, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Well, Arundel, after taking some early losses, has regrouped, and they're on a nice little roll here. And clearly they've got a nice 1-2 punch, Sedgwick throwing the ball and Hunter running. And, never count out a Chuck Markowitz coach team.
How about the ground Wildcats here?
Yeah.
Normally known for the short passing game, the dink and dunk, baby. 202 yards rushing for the Wildcats on Friday night. Broadneck, Shane Davis threw for 301 yards, 2 scores, 19 of 24. Jason Carcamo running for 104 yards. Broadneck now 7-0 as they beat South River 42-7. This is a good win, Bill, because South River had a lot of momentum, was feeling really good about itself coming into this game. Broadneck handled its business right away. 99-yard play from Ethan Williams from Shane Davis as it was a pass that got tipped. Williams kept the concentration, And, of course, in offense, you can't have a play longer than 99 yards. So those two will live in infamy in Broadneck football history because of that. Shane Davis continues to have an outstanding season, Bill. Right now has to be the leader at quarterback in terms of all county when you look at it.
Absolutely, having a great season. And, last week they had the big win over Old Mill, and there was a ripe for a letdown, as you would say. And South River was a team that's quite capable. So, yeah, that's an impressive win. You could easily have seen Broadneck, maybe not playing their best, having that's such an emotional game that Broadneck Old Mill game has become over the years, knowing that they're always two of the top teams. So when you win big over Old Mill, it'd be easy to come back and take South River lightly. They did not, and really handed it to them. And I ran into Rob Harris, the Broadneck coach, at the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame banquet last week, and we should mention two former Anne Arundel County Public School football players inducted in the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame. One, Brooks Barnard, punter from Broadneck, who went on to play for Maryland and briefly in the pros, and the other, Kevin Slade, who was an outstanding football player at Annapolis back in the 70s. So congratulations to them. But Rob Harris was there to recognize Brooks Barnard and support him as a Broadneck High grad. And I mentioned to Rob, what do you think he can run the table? And he said Meade. Meade is a team that has what it takes to beat a team like Broadneck. They have 4 guys in the secondary that can cover. Because what Rob Harris was mentioning is they have multiple receivers. So if you have one stud cornerback, it's not going to do the job because they can throw to any of 3 guys.
They've got the athletes, though.
Meade has the athletes in the secondary to match up against Broadneck. So that is the big game to watch here closing out the season.
Meanwhile, Old Mill, no problems with Chesapeake, 34-14. Raheem Tull ran for 325 yards and 4 touchdowns in this game for Old Mill.
We haven't even mentioned his name. It's been Isaiah Batts has been their primary.
He had 9 carries for 140 yards.
Right. I don't think that Chesapeake rushing defense was so good.
Not very good. Dylan Young connected with Russell Tongue on a 58-yarder for Chesapeake in the loss. Northeast got a big day from DeMonte Snowden, 12 carries, 233 yards, and 4 touchdowns. As Northeast improved to 3-4, beating Southern by a score of 40
Another
to
improved
13.
program, Northeast.
Yeah, no doubt, making some great strides there. So a terrific week of high school football again and again. We've got these matchups. Broadneck Meade's going to be great. St. Mary's Severn going to be great coming down the stretch. And, of course, the Saints right now, as you mentioned, trying to get back into playoff contention with a matchup with Boys Latin coming up this week as well. Coming up, colleges. Wasn't a great day at all locally for all 3. We'll tell you why when we return on the Gridiron Review. Bill and I were in Memphis where the Navy midshipmen, astonishingly, after turning it over 4 times, still, Bill, had one last possession, down 3, to try and go win the game, just like they did last week against Air Force, except, unfortunately, here, they got turnover number 5. And Memphis, Austin Hall played a great game in the secondary, seemed to be around making a lot of tackles, making things happen. Just one of those days for the mids. They don't happen very much to Navy where you have 5 turnovers. Last time they did it was back in 2002 against Boston College. Otherwise, right there to the end, defense played good enough, but Memphis wins 30-27, hands Navy its first loss of the season.
Yep, Ken Niamatololo was very disappointed afterward. Navy didn't play its best game, and you want to lose by being beaten and not beating yourselves. And in this instance, he felt the midshipmen beat themselves. Obviously, 5 turnovers hard to overcome. It's unbelievable that they were in the game at the end. I think Ken Niamatololo had feared somewhat of a hangover effect, if you will. That's the term he used from the big win over Air Force, and I think maybe you saw that a little bit. Memphis was fired up for this game, and you listen to head coach Mike Norville afterwards, and they had this one circled. They felt that this was a game that if they're going to be a contender in the American Athletic Conference, if they're legit, they got to beat a team like Navy. Navy laid it on Memphis in 2 previous meetings, and so this game meant a lot to Memphis, and I just don't know that Navy had as much focus as they needed. Zach Abey, the quarterback, you mentioned the 5 turnovers. He was responsible for all 5, 3 fumbles and 2 interceptions. He also had a bad pitch that was recovered by Navy, so really he put the ball on the ground 4 times. But in his defense, Zach Abey carried the ball 37 times in this game. So I think if you talk to Navy and put some truth serum into Ivan Jasper, he would say they would like a little more diversity. It is the triple option. Zach Abey had 3 times as many carries as the whole rest of the team combined. That's slot backs, fullbacks, everybody. I don't know that they want that kind of disparity, imbalance, if you will, amongst the 3 elements of the triple option. And in Zach Abey's defense, you have a higher risk of fumbling when you're carrying the ball 37 times. So, we'll look going forward. It'll be interesting to see if Navy is able to, because he's carrying the ball to an unbelievable amount so far this season. He's averaging over 30 carries a game, which has never happened in this triple option era. I went back and looked from 2002 on. No one has ever come that close. Ricky Dobbs, 24 carries a game 1 year. That was the closest. So I think that they would like to see a little more balance.
And, of course, maybe an even better fill coming up this week. Central Florida, undefeated Central Florida, coming to town this week in Annapolis for
They got another good quarterback, too.
Yeah, Mackenzie Milton. He's dynamite. Going to be a great game coming up in Annapolis. So if you're in the area, 3:30 on Saturday, you'll want to come see that one in Annapolis. Maryland, the wheels are coming off the cart because too many injured bodies, not enough bodies to replace them. This week, Northwestern shreds the Terrapins 37-21. And, Bill, right now, it's just not enough healthy bodies for Maryland on either side of the football, especially, look, Northwestern had a struggle the last couple of weeks, but Maryland, no resistance for Mr. Jackson on the defensive side, and Northwestern wins this game rather easily.
I think you said it, Pete. We need to talk about defense. We've been focusing on the Maryland offense, the fact that they're down to their 3rd quarterback. Max Bortenschlager's doing the best he can. DJ Moore and Ty Johnson, basically they are the weapons. But I'd put this loss on the defense. They didn't stop Northwestern at all. As my friend Don Marcus wrote in the Baltimore Sun, a very soft underbelly. The short dink and dunk throws.
Like this, soft underbelly.
The running game, their front 7 is not very good. It's that simple. They don't get to the quarterback. They don't sack anybody. They don't pressure anybody. And they're not good against the run. So really, this loss here, we got to talk about Maryland's inability to get any stops on defense. And Northwestern had their way. That's a disappointing loss. They had a chance to come back after getting shellacked by Ohio State. You're at home. And day started off with word that Kevin Anderson, the athletic director, is missing it.
Now he's going on a 6-month sabbatical.
Where's Waldo? And it's amazing to me that apparently Kevin Anderson has not been seen in 3 weeks, and we just now are hearing about it.
Well, the thing is Kevin's a guy that likes to be involved in NCAA committees and stuff, likes to do a lot of legislating from 35,000 feet, and apparently Damon Evans has been running a lot of the day-to-day offices over there at Maryland, and perhaps, maybe as they look forward, and I'm sure this is going to end with Kevin out the door in some capacity. Maybe Damon Evans deserves an opportunity to be the full-time AD, because if you look at the last couple of hires there, Mark Turgeon has got the basketball program going and recruiting at a very high level. Terp's got 2 great commits this past weekend. And obviously with DJ Durkin, it's got the football program going in the right direction. So maybe it's an opportunity to let Damon Evans take over as a full-time athletic director at the University of Maryland. Bowie State Bulldogs lose for the first time this week. Virginia Union gets them by a score of 47-35. Another big game for Ole Mill's Rob Chesson in that one, but the Bulldogs go down. They were ranked 14th in country first time this year on the Division II
Rob's
level.
not the only Anne Arundel County kid. The Bowie State's roster is loaded with local boys.
Smart recruiting.
Bowie State always recruited Anne Arundel County. Way back in the day, Harry Lentz, the great baseball coach at Northeast, was an assistant football coach at Bowie State for a long time. Yep. Larry Brogdon, the Annapolis baseball coach, helped out. So it used to be that Bowie State recruited Anne Arundel County very, very hard, and it looks as though they're back doing that again, which we'd love to see.
Used to play baseball against Larry Brogdon when he played for the Dorsey Stars for all those years in the Chesapeake
he could play,
Independent League. He could still hit the ball. Also, too, when you think about it, Shepherd, who's ranked number 2 in the country in Division II.
Connor Cox from South River.
Shepherd also recruits a lot of kids from Anne Arundel County. DeJuan Neal from Southern playing in their secondary. Connor Cox having a great year for Frostburg. They've only lost 1 time this year. Nationally ranked at the Division III level. Same thing for Salisbury, led at fullback by Southern's Malik Pratt. So a lot of local talent out there. Of course, Bill's College Roundup usually sheds the light on all of those.
All these great Southern football players that are in college, why is Southern not better in football?
Well, you got to have more than one, Bill. Football's played by 11 guys at one time.
Okay, that's just a lot of college guys you're mentioning.
Just telling you, 11 guys at one time. Can't play all 11 spots for everybody out there. We come back, pros. Redskins win. Ravens lose. Sad times for our camera crew around here. Back after this on the Gridiron Review. Here our boys Mark and Cisco wobbling around the office today because Joe Flacco and the Ravens, well, they came up short again. No celebrating at Royal Farms with Justin Tucker this week as the special teams, the only people
at
that get on
M&T
the
Bank
board.
Stadium or M&T Bank.
Look, 27, 20. Well, Joe's always celebrating at
counting
M&T
his
Bank.
money,
Okay,
right.
He's always taking pictures of those big checks that end up directly deposited into his account. 27-24, Bears get to win. Mitchell Trubisky, the rookie quarterback, didn't have to do a whole lot. Jordan Howard had a big run in overtime, and all of a sudden the Bears leave town with a 27-24 victory. And we said this at the beginning of the year, Bill. I was not an advocate for Marty Mornhinweg offensively, but you had to try and give Joe Flacco some semblance of continuity from the same guy year after year, and it's just not working. It's not working. Their offense is atrocious compared to other products that are out there right now. Steelers beat the Chiefs, and now the Ravens behind the Steelers by a game in the AFC North.
Yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around for everyone. And Joe Flacco, we've picked on him all year, so let's leave him alone for now. Jeremy Macklin's out. You need somebody else to step up, wide receiver. There is no one. Rashad Perriman stinks. Max Williams, the tight end, stinks. I mean, these guys are dropping. Mike Preston, my colleague at the Baltimore Sun, said it when he gives the grades. He gave the wide receiver group an F, and all he said is, they can't catch. End of story. And it's true.
Which is not on Joe. Fair, all points being fair. When he does put it on target, if they don't catch it,
right. Well,
same result.
Chris Moore has it bounce off his chest into the arms of Adrian Amos, a local product, by the way, Calvert Hall. 90 yards. What a run that was. A nice return. The happiest Baltimore people at this game were Adrian Amos and the
Will Fuller.
The Fuller kid, the fifth, and how incredible is that story? One family, 5 children, they all made the NFL. What are the odds of that? But they came back to Baltimore and had great games, and the Ravens did not. And, the vaunted defense had a chance to step up in overtime. As Terrell Suggs said, it really stinks to lose with the defense on the field. That's what happened. As bad as the offense was,
any good defense, you leave them out on the field long enough, and eventually they get worn down. I mean, it's just human nature, and that's exactly.
Well, that's a terrible loss, really.
Yeah, can't lose.
Bears had one win coming into this.
At home to the Bears.
At home to the Bears with a rookie quarterback.
Meanwhile, speaking of rookie quarterbacks, C.J. Beathard, grandson of Bobby Beathard, you've heard that about 9,000 times by now. Thankfully, if you watch the game on TV and listen to sports radio locally, you've heard that quote, C.J. Beathard. He's Bobby Beathard's grandson. Use it at your water cooler tomorrow. He came into the game and got the 49ers back in it after the Redskins jumped out to a 17-0 lead. But Kirk Cousins, 2 touchdowns throwing, 1 rushing. Redskins win. That's all you have to do is win, 26-24. 49ers have lost 5 games in a row by 3 points or less.
Yeah, well, the 49ers are going to be pretty good under Kyle
on your
Shanahan.
heart, man.
And you mentioned Beathard. I think he's the quarterback of the future.
Yeah, he's starting next week.
Yeah,
It's
he
a
looked
smart
pretty
decision.
good. It's funny, at Towson University, I went, 2 of Bobby Beathard's sons played football at Towson when I was there. Kurt Beathard was the starting quarterback, and his younger brother, Jeff Beathard, was the starting fullback. I didn't realize they had a third brother. That's the brother who's the father of CJ. But, win's a win's a win. Chris Thompson played well again.
Yep, 4 catches, 105 yards.
He's a playmaker. I wish they put the ball in his hands more often.
Well, they did 20 times this week.
Okay, finally. Well,
16 carries and 4 receptions.
Right. Win is a win, and Jay
3-2 going to Philadelphia next week for a showdown with the Eagles.
Right. Well, I was really miffed about a line in one of the articles I read today that said, Kyle Shanahan, former assistant and maybe future coach, are we putting Jay Gruden out to pasture? I think he's done a pretty good job. People already want to bring back Kyle Shanahan.
The question is everybody asks now is whether Kirk Cousins is going to be the quarterback of 49ers next year.
Because he and Shanahan are tight.
Yeah,
right.
We'll see. Could be. You never know.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, the Redskins are right in the thick of things in the NFC East.
No doubt about it. Big showdown with the Eagles coming up, and maybe it's a foreshadowing of things to come. But in my fantasy football matchup against my colleague on the Navy Radio Network, Joe Miller, the big Eagles fan, guess who won this week? Pedro, 62-61. Kirk Cousins with 27 points. Aaron Rodgers for Joe, 0 because he had a broken collarbone.
But Joe's happy because the Eagles won.
That's true. Thursday night over Carolina. They're playing well right now at 5-1. By the way, final week of the youth football regular season is at
Playoffs,
hand.
baby.
Playoffs are right around the corner. This is my favorite time of the year when it becomes playoff time for all of these youth football teams, because we do see upsets, and it's amazing what happens in the carnage that occurs in some of these playoff brackets, as we had a couple of really good upsets along the way last year. So go to aacounty.org, get on team schedules, find some games, go watch them this week. These are the final games of the regular season, and then the following week, all the playoff games go on turf, so we'll be at high school fields and the turf fields all around Anne Arundel County playing playoff games the following week.
I got to mention, I got an email from a very proud parent, Brooklyn Park 80-pound team, undefeated and unscored upon, and the parent wanted me to come out and cover the game Sunday. Unfortunately, I was on en route from Memphis back to Baltimore. I would have gone out and covered the Bees, the Brooklyn Park, well, the Broncos. The Broncos, right.
The high school used to be the Bees.
Right, the Brooklyn Park, but hey, got to give credit. 80-pound Brooklyn Park team, undefeated and unscored upon. Now, I don't know the result of Sunday's game yet, but sounded like they're rolling.
We'll see what happens there. And by the way, as you mentioned, the two football players got inducted into Anne Arundel County Hall of Fame. Kudos to my colleague and a guy that spent a lot to my career. I might not have one if not for the opportunity he gave me.
That's right.
Dave Johnson, who got inducted into the Anne Arundel County Hall of Fame as well. That'll do it for our show this week. As always, we appreciate you watching us. We'll be back again next week with youth football playoff previews, and we'll talk about this week's high school slate, colleges, and pros as well. For Bill Wagner and Pete Medhurst, thanks for joining us on this edition of the Gridiron Review.